Come with us in the garden so we can take you to the heights so you can see. And come with us in the garden so we can take you to the heights of inner peace. Welcome to the Healing Garden. And today we have two extremely very special guests with us today. We have Baba Paul Best, who is the president of Keepers of the Culture. And we have with us also today the former president of Keepers of the Culture, Mama Irma. Welcome.
Thank you.
Peace and
Thank
blessings.
you.
And
Glad to be here.
this is very special because you guys are featured in the very first edition of New Conscious Man, New Conscious Woman, and a segment of New Conscious Man, New Conscious Woman is the Healing Garden. And so it's so appropriate because part of healing is being able to learn about life, and there's no better way to learn about life than through the wonderful stories that you tell. You have told as keepers of the cultures for over 30 years. Um, one of the African cultures is that in just about all traditional cultures, there's an oracle, a system of being able to communicate with God in some kind of way. In some traditions, they use bones. In some traditions, they use language. No different than the I Ching, as a matter of fact, that they use in China, you know. And so
Yes.
I know the people, they use the Elagoon. Um, and in that tradition, stories are told to children when they are very young. It's stories, but then when they grow up, those stories become the readings that teach them about life, you know. And so um, I wanted to open today just to share this with everyone a little bit about. So I'm going to share the screen and so you can see um, the beautiful work that Keepers of the Culture has done over the years. And we're going to start with that little presentation. Um, and then we're going to jump right into our interview today. And forgive me,
Sure.
I'm still working with this. Hmm. And so I want to, as we start, I wanted to open up with what this very first slide is. And it says, following in the footsteps of our ancestors. And that is what you all have done, is because to follow in the foot of your ancestors. And so my first question is, what made founding members of Keepers of the Culture decide to do a storytelling group? And what made them decide to do that? What inspired them? So I guess I'll ask Mama Irma.
Yes.
Yeah. I've been around for a long while, and Mother Mary Carter Smith, who's passed now, and Mama Linda Goss, who's a Philadelphia, they had gone to a big festival in Tennessee, but they didn't see people that looked like us there. And the storytelling was all right, but they got inspired and said, we need an organization like this for Black storytelling. So they came back and they started the National Association of Black Storytellers. That's our mother organization. We have people all around the country that belong to it. And once they started that, we were one of their first affiliates. We are a microcosm of NABS, National Association of Black Storytellers. And Keepers of the Culture started out with 4 or 5 people just meeting and telling stories and sharing stories. Stories. Some of them were educators, so it was stories that they could tell at their in their classrooms, in libraries, churches, everything. So people started getting interested. It was at people's apartments. Now, when I got in it, I was working in mental health, and I had a student who had joined. Her name happened to be Hammond too, and she wanted me to critique her story. And I thought it was fantastic because it was a regular story, but the way it was crafted, the way her voice was, it just drew me right in. And so she said, "You might be interested in our group." So I started following them around everywhere they would meet. They hadn't even had performances yet, but they would just meet because they love to tell stories, and they learn learn to tell stories in the proper tradition. And I learned so much from them until one day it was my turn. I didn't know, unbeknownst to me, I'd been following them. I had used the stories to tell my children. My boys were young then. And they made an announcement. So today we're going to have a new storyteller who's never told before, and we want to welcome her. And I'm looking all around. People were clapping. And it was me. So I got baptized in telling stories and Keepers of the Culture, and that was about 30 years ago. I've been telling and performing ever since. And now we do a lot of performances. We teach storytelling. We are the Afrocentric storytelling group for Philadelphia. So it's a long story, but if you ask a storyteller something, you're going to get a whole story about it.
Yes. Um, and so I know that I'm gonna skip ahead to you, Baba. Um, so Baba Paul is the president of, or the current president of Cuban Culture. And so one of my questions is that I've known about Cuban Culture for many years, and but you're so young. So what inspired you as a young person to become a storyteller?
Oh, what inspired me? Again, there's a story behind that answer. And so to keep it short, I'm from Gary, Indiana. And so I was raised by older parents. They had me at an older age. And so essentially being raised by my parents because of their age, it had an energy as if I was being raised by grandparents. And so my parents, they are the oldest of both of their families. And so their aunts and uncles were almost like brothers and sisters because they grew up around the same time as my aunts and uncles, as their aunts and uncles, which were my great aunts and uncles. And so my parents, were always talking to them like, you have the Uncle Bruh, which was my dad and my mom's uncle, but they called him brother because they grew up together. And so that my parents had that relationship with their elders, which were in a sense their peers. So whenever they got together, that's all they did. Like, I think they literally all they did was talk about stories. What happened, this, and that. And every once in a while, there was a reference to the president or like yesterday or something. But as a child, I was around all of that, hearing these stories, hearing about the past, and oh, did you know your dad did this or this happened and that happened? And so it was just a natural thing. And as I got older, those elders began to pass away, and I didn't realize what a deficit that was to me, not having those stories, not having those moments of them sitting around getting together for whatever occasion. And so, a couple years before I moved to Philadelphia, I started telling my own stories at like open mics. And so coming into Keepers of the Culture reminded me of that void that I had from not having my elders telling me stories. And so coming to Keepers of the Culture brought that back to me and made me realize it's a big part of my life and my purpose in this life. And so I've been able to get a holistic experience, getting back to understanding, yes, this is your family and their stories, but this connects to an even bigger and older tradition of us as African people. And so coming to Koti has given me that, like, wow, this is all good. It's just transformed, it's manifested in different ways through the diaspora, but it still goes back to the tradition of the Jali and the Jali Musa and the griot of being the people who kept the stories of our families and our cultures.
Wow, that is wonderful. So what impact have you, sit more in the comments because I only see the bottom part of you. So sit back. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay.
What impact would you say Keepers of the Culture has had overall? And then, so I guess I'll ask that to you, and then to you, Paul, I'll ask what impact do you think storytelling has had on young people? So you could go first.
Okay. Well, overall, I've been telling stories for a long while. And sometimes, like in the beginning, I really didn't know how much of an impact storytelling had. And now, because I've been in storytelling so long, some of the children that I used to tell stories to at the library are grown up and have children of their own. And they come back and they remember that, I used to be at the library on Saturdays and I loved your stories. I remember Miss Maybell's hands. And, they actually remember the stories. So I know that they got something from it. One experience I had, I was working at a hospital in Roxborough. And somebody said there was a nurse that wanted to see me. I worked in the psych unit, behavioral health. So this nurse came to me and she said, "You don't know me," she said, "but I was in one of your lectures. I used to work at Jefferson too, and I introduced storytelling as therapy at Jefferson. And I had to talk to this group of nurses one time, and I told a story, and every one of them got into the story. It was one of my signature stories. And she remembered that, and it affected her to the point where she talked to the department head of behavioral health for geriatrics, and she was inspired, and she became a geriatric psych nurse. And she said that storytelling had an impact on her doing that. So those are the kinds of things that had an impact. And I'm telling you, and which you might remember this too, my children were always with me. We had Watoto of Joy, and they were the first Watotos. And like we say, the children get the stories in their heart. They may not remember them until later on. And now my grown son tells me about stories that impacted him. And he makes analogies. Well, that's just like the frog that did this, this, and this. And he figures out his problems from my stories because he was always there listening to the stories. So he got it. Yeah. So it's had an impact on people, and it's had an impact on me because it makes me know how important it was. I remember when your daughter went away to college and they asked me to speak, and I needed to give her a message, and I had a story about being yourself, being authentic, and about what people might try to change you and all that, but it was a story, and she really appreciated it. She really did, and the adults appreciated it too. So you,
Go ahead.
so one of the things is a personal gain to me to be able to tell stories and have them impact on the life of others. Even when we tell stories that bring tears to people's eyes, we don't just leave them with tears, but it might be the beginning of their catharsis about something, or help them to see themselves in something, or change the way they think of things. And I guess I have that kind of edge because I do work in behavioral health, where I did, and I use my stories as therapy. There wasn't a storytelling therapy where I worked, but I was a music therapist, and I used the elements of music therapy, applied them to storytelling, and helped people in many ways
Mhm.
because they could see themselves in the story.
And I just want to add to something that you said. Irma, you mentioned, storytelling you did for my daughter at her graduation party. Well, it just so happened,
Uh-huh.
here's the impact you had. She went away to IUP, which is upstate Pennsylvania, and there was a situation up there where um, some Caucasian students were trying to protest. Um, they were doing a good thing. They were trying to protest um, newborn slavery in the country. And I forgot the word they used for that
Mm-hmm.
in my mind. And they were doing a good thing. They were trying to, say this is this and the rest. Unfortunately, that slips my mind. But the name of it. So what they did was they put a noose on a tree and
Wow.
they drew in chalk, um, end. They didn't say end slavery, and of course, the name doesn't come to me. Um, but they said that, and they the rain washed the chalk away. So then the black students came out and they saw this noose on the tree. So that started a whole thing. And
Wow.
because you told my daughter to be authentic and be who she is,
Mm-hmm.
what wound up happening was the NAACP got called in, and there was
Wow.
argument between the black students and the white students, and the Aima had become known as kind of like the militant on campus because of the way she was grew up.
Grace. Yeah.
She wasn't even at the meeting because her friends were like, "Don't tell Aima because she's gonna," because she would call
That's my girl.
me, she would call me and say me, Ma, these people are asleep. They don't know. And I was like, wow, she really listened to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Long story short, she winds up going to the meeting, and she was the one who solved the problem when she got to that meeting between the black students and the white students. Because she said, look, I understand that you were trying to do a good thing, but you don't understand the meaning of what a noose means to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why people are put. And at the end of that meeting, the head of the NAACP for Pennsylvania shook her hand. He said, thank you. You
Wow. Yeah, that's my girl. Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Paul, tell me about the impact you've had on young people with
Oh, wow.
Well, impact on young people with story.
Excuse me.
As a middle school teacher, I'm always finding ways to infuse a story through a lesson. There have been times I've been trying to teach something, and I'm like, "Hey, y'all, there's a story that y'all will get that will teach y'all this better than this lesson." And so, or sometimes if I notice, their energy is really high and they're kind of antsy, I'm like, "Oh, I think we need a story," and y'all be quiet. It's time. Don't say nothing. Talking because they know. I always tell them, no silence, no story. And so it's like they want to get really quiet so they can hear. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm really I'm seeing my impact because I am to the point now where I am teaching. I have students where I've had older siblings, and so families are starting to know me as a whole family unit. Like, oh yeah, he had Mr. Best, she had Mr. Best, and then the older siblings like, don't do that in his class, don't do this, and he always gonna tell a story, and so it's funny how they will let you know that they remember when you least expect it,
Yes.
and
Yes.
then even the ways they let you know. My students, one of their favorite stories is why monkeys look like people, and so the things they remembered in that the lesson was, to never be jealous of anyone and always listen to good instruction. And so the way they'll, joke around with each other, or even now with the advent of Zoom, I have parents who are at home as their child is doing virtual learning, and they're hearing me tell these stories, they're hearing me teach their child. And so they are able to kind of reinforce that lesson that I've
Mm.
said to this child through a story.
Mm.
And the children, it's being in middle school, they're in such a weird phase. They're not a baby anymore. They're not grown, even though they think they are.
Right,
Mm.
But there's still this small part of them that is listening to what you're saying, even though they may not be able to express that they are listening. And so in classes every single day, even through this virtual learning, I'm seeing that impact of how being the storyteller, me teaching social justice and history, which is essentially storytelling, how they are able to recall things and make connections. Storytellers were the first teachers. And so being able to make those connections through this story, I can apply this to my real life, or this story reminds me of something in my real life. And it essentially, these stories are helping our children, our Black and brown children, evolve. And
Yes.
so that's what I had to understand. The impact I'm making is I'm literally helping these children evolve and understanding their existence in this world.
Yes.
that is a tremendous contribution. You said something very key when you said that when you say no story, fill silence. That is phenomenal because I was a teacher and children have a short attention span. So classroom
Mm-hmm.
management is one of the you spend so much time doing classroom management, but when just be able to get their attention like that, especially for a subject like history, which most children don't, adults
Right.
too. That's
Mm.
not a subject that people are like, oh yeah, I want to do that. They feel it. The first um verb for history is boring. But for you to get their attention like that is phenomenal.
It is.
Thank you.
So one of the
Maybe you can tell how you group your kids too, because I thought that was, he has communities in his classroom, and he has visuals of our heroes and sheroes, and I think that putting that together with story, it has an impact. It sticks with them.
yes, yes, yes. And you the other thing you said is you have middle school students. So again, middle school students, they are like you said, they're all over the place. They're not grown, but they think they are.
Mm-hmm.
Their attention away from the television, it really shows to me, you know what? Maybe it's time for us to take this to the next level. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
through this new social media, for both of you to be able to connect with young people like that, and
Mm-hmm.
hear a story.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to share this screen for a minute and show one of the things that what impact have you had? I know you guys have um, been all over Philadelphia, and these are some of the places that you've been. Some of
Yeah.
the colors that are
Oh,
part of
yeah.
culture, and um, one of the what my question is, what impact have you had on adults in relationship to um, family, that you observed? And either one of you can take that question.
You want to go, Paul?
You said, what impact have we had on Black families?
Black families.
Well, you want
You
me to
can
go?
take it, Mom. You go first, and I'm
Yeah.
set me up for the layup.
One of the things that we have done with Black families is help them to know and change their rituals. When I'm asked to speak at a wedding, I know my stepson got married. I was asked to speak at his wedding, and I did an African thing. The story I told had a proverb in it, and I also brought them something hot, something sweet, honey and hot sauce. And I made an analogy about that, about when your marriage gets bitter, then you turn, it's the hot sauce. but you can turn from that and go to the honey and bring the sweetness back into your life.
Ooh, stop, girl. That's right.
Yeah, so we did, and then I was talking about a ritual that we did. Brother Nasheed and I and another and a dancer created a ritual instead of having a birthday party for this 94-year-old woman. She didn't want to have a birthday party, so her niece thought it would be a good time to get all the family together to know one another. So we created this ritual where we went back 4 generations to who was married and how they come down and how they got that name. And we found, and we knew that they were from the Igbo tribe in Nigeria. And we looked it up and we found a proper name and we renamed her. And we had a real ceremony that involved her grandchildren. We had drumming. We had the stool brought in, an African stool. They had food. They had rented this place. They had family from down south, family that had never met one another. They had cousins, you know, and that was a new ritual. Instead of just having a birthday party, they got to learn who their family was, and we had authentic African dance. We had drumming. We taught them singing, and we taught them a lot about what light is. And we had those little light things that you use on, I guess, Halloween or when you go to a show, and everybody got to participate with that light and bringing the light into the room. It was really a nice ceremony, and I think other people, you know, we had the COVID, but there were a couple of people that wanted to do their birthdays similar to that or do their mother's birthdays similar to that because it gave them a chance to look at where they came from. That's so important. Our people don't know where they came from, so they can be told that they're nothing or they don't count. But when you know where you came from and you can look in a relative's face and see your face or see something similar or you see your grandfather in them. So we do need a lot of new rituals in our culture that means something to us. Jumping the broom means something else. In that same way with my stepson and his wife, they actually jumped the broom. So it was really nice. We had that part in there. And Paul, you've developed some rituals because even around funerals, we've had people that may transition. And Paul, tell them how we do that, how we've impacted that.
Oh wow. Well, one thing we have been, one thing keepers of the culture, we're trying to, I guess, our stake in the community. We're telling people we're professional Black people, and so with that, with that, you know, we are pros at being Black, and so
Yes.
with that, we are starting to teach the Black community, like, hey, this is us. This is our culture. These are the professional things that Black people do. And one of those things we are bringing back and trying to normalize is libations. And
Mhm.
so we tend to forget about how important libations are when we start anything. It is an automatic homage to the creator, but also our ancestors, you know, bringing them into our space, letting them know we stand on your shoulders, letting them know that we cannot do anything if it weren't for their legacies. And
Mhm.
so one thing I had started doing at funerals was uh, doing libations, but specifically intentionally choosing specific ancestors to call on based off of the lives that they lived. And
Mhm.
so, Mom, if I tell you about the one at your son's memorial
Yes.
service?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, she asked me to do the libations for her son Eric Hammond's memorial service, and so I just began to think about who the brother was, the circumstances that led to his transition, and I just began to think of the people in our history who were champions or involved in those type of circumstances. So I called on Ella Baker. You know, she said, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest till the killing of Black women's children come to an end and Black mothers' sons."
Mm.
Then I called on Malcolm X, who said we had to do this by any means necessary. And then I called on one of the NAB's founders, Mother Mary Carter Smith.
Yes.
She was a mother who someone had murdered her son,
Yeah.
but she dedicated a good portion of her life visiting that murderer in prison. And
Mm.
so
Yes.
from the memorial, I called on specific ancestors that I know we needed their energy. We need the energy to know that this was an injustice and that we're going to have to fight against this. We need the energy for our strength, knowing that this is going to be a long struggle. And we need the energy of our ancestors who taught us to forgive when things like this happen to our families. And so just that one ritual brought in so much into just one service for an entire community who was mourning a transition of a young brother. And so Kosi is starting to take a stance on this. We're not just telling stories, we're keeping our culture. And so we are giving it back to our Black community like, hey, this isn't just for us to do as a hobby. This is what you should be doing in your families. The same way we can pull stories, you need to be able to be the storyteller in your family and pull those stories out, because that's our real history. That's the true Black history. We always have the famous, the top 50 people we celebrate in Black history. But a lot of those movements and the work they did would not have been fruitful if it weren't for great grandma boycotting, if it weren't for great grandpa protesting, the small everyday grassroots people who actually made this a movement. And so we have to acknowledge that our stories and our families are the foundation of who we are in this country and before we got here.
That is very, very good. I think many festivals, whatever, and people pour, libation. But what you said is very key, especially for the general public, to be able to pour libations in a way that's relevant,
Yes.
especially relevant to the life of that person. Because you know why? Because matter can neither be created or destroyed. And so we as Black people understand that the spirit lives on. And those ancestors walked that child to the
Yes. Yes. Yes, they did.
you know. And that is something that will help with this. I mean, that tradition, what you said is so powerful. That is something that will help so many African American families who are not necessarily Yoruba, or Syrians or whatever. That is tremendous, and it's just tremendous.
And it really impacted my family because, it was like healing for us to hear that. And part of my family that had never heard it, they remember it. Because if I say Paul, it's, oh, that's the brother that did that libation. I say, yeah, and everything is okay. It taught them something.
Wow. And that's my next question. How do you see um, storytelling as a healing mechanism?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Each one of you both can take that.
Well, I know for myself, I've used storytelling as healing as part of my job. I know that it heals the mind. I know that it heals the mind. I've worked with Alzheimer's patients before, and that's what made me start doing stories. Alzheimer's people cannot connect mentally. They're all over the place. They can't connect. But if you get them in a circle and you do storytelling, you can get them to the here and now. It may not last, but for that point, they are in the here and now, and they're able to just be settled. I've seen this happen, and that's why, I started really using storytelling in behavioral health. You see storytelling heal through example. We try to get our people, our children, to learn about being healthy, eating food that is healthy, having healthy habits, and sometimes we put that in poetry, or we tell a story about, and we use the foods in it and say what it's for. The kids are learning this way. you know. So storytelling is really a good teaching tool, you know, because you can storytelling has rhythm, and storytelling has vibrations, and if you get that into people, just like music, you get it into people, you can change that vibration. I've been in situations that I've quelled, well, not me, but the story, because people are getting all rambunctious and they want to fight and they want to do this and they want to do that. And you get them out of that. You can pull them, if you can pull them into a story, then you can, then you can settle it. I remember my good friend Mama Nzinga told me this story because she does, she works with children. And she's talking about this bully child. It was a girl. And she would always bully the children and she would start fights and nobody could do anything with her. And so she and this girl were getting ready to fight and they were going to have it out and everything. And Mama Nzinga pulled them to the side. She said, I got something for you. I really want you to, come and do this. So she said, hold hands. She made them hold hands and she held their hands. And then she started singing, ring around the rosy, pocket full of posy. And they just fell out laughing and forgot about the fighting, And then she went on and told them a story. So you never know. That's why storytellers, griots have to be ready to tell a story wherever they are or whatever the situation is. I've gotten kids to stop crying because of a story or something, telling them something when they need to hear something positive. So, we it is a healing tool and it is a teaching tool. It's really a good teaching tool to teach people. Teach them about themselves, their environment, other things, really a good teaching tool.
Yes, yes. Paul?
For me, I know the power of healing stories for families. And I know that firsthand just because my dad, he transitioned back in November, and he was my best friend, my best friend, my twin, all of that. And so he was, he never professed to be a storyteller, but every time we talked, it was a story. And it had got to the point he knew out of all of the siblings, I was the one that was like, I don't care if he done said it 8 times, he's gonna say it differently. And he knows I'm always interested when he's opening his mouth to speak. And so
Yeah, I'm getting feedback. Hold on for a minute. Getting feedback. So
I'm gonna mute myself.
okay, go ahead.
And so with my dad, this past year when the pandemic hit and me and my siblings, we went home to help my mom and take care of him. And I think it was like September when I came back here, and it was to the point I would call him, and it got to be where we would talk every night. So after he done talked to everybody else and been to the doctor and all of that, I was kind of like the last person he talked to before he went to bed. And every night for pretty much a whole month, we would talk on the phone and I would tell him stories about him. Daddy, I remember this. And I remember when you said this. And Daddy, I used to love it when you would take me to the flea markets on Saturday mornings, and just reminding him essentially of the impact he made as a Black father. And what happened every single time I would tell the story and he would sprinkle in some more, add another part that I didn't know about, or some behind the scenes, or, bringing some type of connection. And me and my dad, we've had a good, strong relationship for a long time, for a number of years. But looking back on that, not realizing these were some of the last intimate moments I had with my father, and that it was through stories that we affirmed, what he was to me as my father, what I have been to him as his son. The stories is what made all the difference. And even now, as I go through a grieving process, it is the stories that are keeping me. It is the memories my dad's stories, knowing what he said. And I have hours and hours of footage. I recorded for like the past 5 years. Whenever he talked, I was recording him either on audio or video. So I have all these footage to remind me. And the weird thing is, I haven't listened to really any of them since he passed. I've listened to maybe 3 or 4, but it's because the stories are in me. The
Yes.
memories are in me, and they have been healing me. I think of different things that I would do, and I already know what he's gonna say about it, what he got to say, what I need to do, or if I did it wrong, because you just do what you want. And so stories heal our families. And so if with coaching, we are really stepping into 30 years, we're seeing what have we done that has worked for 30 years, and what have we done that maybe we need to improve or it needs to evolve in some way, and yet keep our tradition. And so one thing we recognize is we need to do more of community work, in the sense of not just having storytelling opportunities and productions and people come in there entertained and they learned, but giving them the same tools that we have to tell stories in their own families, to heal their families. I talked to me and my cousins, we have a group chat, and it's amazing how we can have somebody tell their side of the story. And it's like, well, I didn't know this. I just knew Auntie moved here. And when you get all these puzzle pieces, it's like, well, I just know this part. I don't think it's much. Well, tell me what you know. Because then next thing you know, that little piece, it brought like 6 other pieces of the story together. And now we have this whole understanding about one ancestor that was a mystery to most of us, because we all only had one puzzle piece.
Right,
And now
right.
everybody, well, Auntie, she taught me how to cook. Well, Auntie, if it was Oprah on, she wasn't going to prayer meeting. Auntie this, and so we was getting all these pieces together. And at the same time, I'm getting closer to my cousins because we talking about an ancestor, you know.
Right.
And so if Black families would understand that knowing your stories of your own people is a part of your identity. I always tell my friends, we've forgotten our ancestors, and so therefore we have forgotten ourselves. And
Yes.
half of the stuff we are dealing with as a Black community in America and beyond is because we haven't connected and remembered our ancestors, the people who have done these works, who have been through these things.
Yes.
Part of us and our lineage is whatever our ancestors dealt with, it's our duty to fix it, because it's
Yes.
in us. We're what they might call it generational curses or things like that. But we are the most updated versions of our ancestors. And it is our responsibility to repair the things from their lives that we now carry. And if we repair it, the people after us, our lineage after us, don't ever have to go through that again.
Mm.
And so
That,
it is essentially that our stories is therapy. Our stories are the cure. Our stories are the healing. It heals the past, it heals the present, and it protects the future.
wow, that is so powerful, because my next question was going to be, with this past 2020 year that we had, it brought to light the plight of African American men in particular. And um, one of the things that happened, that came to light during this whole period, was from the 1970s to the present, when affirmative action and programs were given so that people like myself and Mama Irma could take advantage of it. On the other hand, they took away, and they took away a lot of the Black men out of our communities, which led to a lot of single parenthood and what have you, and just a mentality among too many young men that they don't see things like you do, because they didn't have their father. And so as you were talking, it came to me, that is something perhaps that Coach E can also do, or that, I was going to ask you, how do you see that? What role do you see playing in helping to heal young Black men, those who've been incarcerated and those who are on the street still, through storytelling?
Well,
I mean,
there
what
actually there's
future, can you?
there's a couple programs. I don't want to reveal too much. There are a couple programs that we are working on. One is specifically helping Black people, but mainly it's impacted Black men who have been victims of gun violence. And so there's
Mm,
so much issues concerning not just in Philadelphia, but in Black communities around the country, issues around gun violence and what it has done, because that has been a main way that either through gun violence or through the prison system, and usually it's both, of a Black man being removed from his family and the damage that it does. And one thing we have to recognize now is, and I see it in my children, when you go back in history, my children's grandparents were the people who saw and were impacted by the crack epidemic. And so now we have elders who either have been victimized, traumatized, or hurt one way or another through the crack epidemic. And so there's a lot of healing that needs to take place, not just on the young brother, but on his elder, because now we have a visual representation of this trauma being passed down. It hurt grandma, it hurt grandpa, it impacted how grandma and grandpa raised my parents. And that has impacted how my parents have raised me. And some of these brothers are now on the brink of raising their own children. And so Coty is recognizing that we could fix a whole lot of things in just one family in multiple generations, just by recognizing how first we have to acknowledge that trauma. And storytelling is healing because it brings it up, but it also lets you see the bigger picture. One thing I tell my staff members when I do storytelling workshops is there's always glory in the story. I don't care what it is. There always is, and you need to find it. The fact that, we're kind of getting tired of telling the enslaved stories, but there's still glory in that. There's still glory because we are a result of their resiliency.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
You know, and so teaching through that trauma that, yes, there's this trauma, let's address it, but there's also a whole outcome of glory that you are the stand-in glory yourself. And now you have been empowered and equipped to move forward to impact those who are carrying you, those you carry, and the generations that are inside you coming after you.
So powerful. So powerful. I'm going to move on to something that you all do as I share this screen. And it is Love Night.
Yes.
So that is my next question. How have you, as we talk about families, tell me about Love Night and what it is and what it's been. And I guess I'll start with you, Irma. Turn your mic on.
Love Night has been our tradition. We were the first affiliate that did Love Night. And the reason why we started Love Night is because there were so many negative things in the 90s about, you never saw Black love on television. You never saw Black people being patriotic. You never saw real love. You know, everything you saw was violence or craziness. They never thought about it. So we wanted to show Black love and bring people together. It wasn't all erotic love. It was, when we first started out, we would have candy kisses on the table, and we would serve desserts, and we would have music, and people would tell stories about love. And it was a time to see Black people coming together. You know, sometimes we would have a whole table, a whole family would be there for Love Night because they wanted to see it. You know, or sometimes we would serve real food and families came together and broke bread. They looked at our storytellers, and sometimes the first time they saw us tell stories, I didn't know she could do that. And then they would get something out of the stories. You know, every love night has been different. We've had it at different places. We've had different guests to come in, and we've had different themes. You know, our last one we did was Undaunted Love, how people in strange situations still show their love and their loyalty. So Love Night is one of our main things you know, and we didn't let the pandemic stop us. We had a really good love night this year. Paul made sure that we used this Zoom and had our love night and had a bigger crowd coming than ever. Tell them about it, Paul. Tell them about our love night.
Okay. First, my first love night was actually the first time I performed in Coatsy. I was performing as Just Be Simple from Langston Hughes' Simple Stories. And so what I observed in that first year and then the subsequent years afterwards was I saw an issue, but I saw an immediate solution. Love Night was and is a safe space for Black couples.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until I saw Black couples at Love Night, laughing, dancing, talking to other couples, having just a good time and just relaxing, figuratively letting their hair down. It made me realize these brothers and sisters are enjoying this because there's not a lot of places they can do that in the company of other Black couples, celebrating their existence. That doesn't exist a lot for Black couples anymore. Because of so many forms of oppression, we've become silos, and we try to make it and figure it out on our own. And so Love Night has become this safe space where Black people can just be together, celebrate their love, whatever that looks like, in the company of other people that relate to what they're going through. And they realize we are here to celebrate who we are. And we hear stories that reflect. We see mirrors of our love in these stories. We see windows. We get to look into the lives of other forms of love from these stories. And we see doors where I can see another expression of love. And not only can I see it, I have an opportunity to transform and walk into that and carry my lover into a new space, another dimension of love based off a story. And I see what our love can be. So that's what I think Love Night is, and what I've seen it do for Black couples. Last year with the pandemic, usually around March is when we start planning Love Night because it's a long process. There's a whole lot of irons you have to put in the fire and a whole lot of wheels that are turning. And so I always enjoy when there's this moment where the elders are just like, well, it is what it is, it was good. Let's sit back, And I was like, no, we are about to do this virtually. We got YouTube, we got cameras. We're gonna do this, y'all. Just follow my vibe and we're gonna be good. And so that's what we ended up doing. We everybody rehearsed their stories, and I'm like, we're gonna record it. We're gonna do some social distancing. So I had a schedule. All the elders chose where they wanted to shoot their video, in the park, on their porch, on the water, different things. And we were socially distanced. Everybody had their recording ready. And I remember the first teller that I recorded, Mama Jawara, and I recorded her. And at that, she's like, okay, what's next? I was like, that's it. I'll just tune in on, August 8th to watch yourself tell us. Oh my God, we're done. That's it. I was like, that's all you have to do. That was your rehearsal and everything. And so by having their support, I was able to organize, and it was an intergenerational effort. I called in some friends to help me find music and do editing, and ended up where they're like, oh man, can we join Coachy? Because we want to do this more. And so Coachy has really transformed, where Coachy has been kind of the elders and then the Watoto and maybe some people in between. But now there's this whole representation of every generation where it's like, we are the village now. We got the elders giving wisdom. We got the young people who are taking the modernality of everything and carrying it. And then we have the children who we are pouring into, but a lot of those children end up being in Coachy. They continue on as they age out of Watoto. They'll go away to college and come right back. We have a couple people who are in Keepers of the Culture now who grew up as a Watoto. And so Love Night was not just an expression for the world in the sense of undaunted love as Black people. But for me, I saw Love Night this past year as the story of keepers of the culture, the undaunted love. We have still stuck together. We have kept our love for storytelling despite all odds. The tagline of it was um, difficult and stories of difficult and complicated love. And despite everything that has happened to keepers of the culture, the things we've seen in our personal lives, just the condition of being a Black person in America, we have still kept that fire burning. The passion for storytelling, the passion for sharing a story, the passion for developing as a storyteller. That that love night, and to have over 800 people watching from different parts of the world, that was a huge testament to
Some of the
what
parts of
love
the
can
world.
do.
What,
Say
what,
that
what,
again.
what were some of the parts of the world?
Well, the part that stuck out to me was France, and
Wow.
so we streamed it through YouTube and through Facebook, and you can still view them on either of those platforms. But we used Eventbrite to promote it, and so by using Eventbrite, we were able to email everybody and have like a streamlined platform for them to view it on. And so the next day after the event, I get the email from Eventbrite. They automatically send you like a logistics report. And so a part of the report was this map, the globe, and it's kind of showing you like where people were. And so I see I'm zooming in, trying to look at, this is in America, obviously. Let me look at from Pennsylvania on. And as I zoom in, I see on the side this number popping up somewhere else. And I'm just like, wait, what? And so as I zoom in Europe, there are some people in France watching.
Wow.
Still haven't confirmed how they found out. We think it was just through the Storytelling Network passing the links and the information on. But the fact to know that there were people there and then also getting feedback. Actually, I had a friend from Senegal who had gave me feedback. He was watching, and he got excited knowing, being Senegalese, being indigenous where he was at, knowing that there were still remnants, and he saw parallelisms of Black people, still holding on to tradition. You have the African man seeing the Africans in America still holding on to African tradition. That was very encouraging because, as people who are in Africa, the media has put this smokescreen between them and us. They don't understand what we do. They have misconceptions about us, and the media makes us have misconceptions about them. And so there was that one moment where we were able to clear that smoke and let somebody else that looks like us, that deals with the same things that we deal with, say, hey, we still here. We are still on the same page, whether you believe it or not.
Right. That is tremendous. So one of my last questions is relative to um stories and tying stories in the African culture to real life as a lesson. I know, Irma, you had mentioned that one of the differences between the National Association of Black Storytellers and the Keepers of the Culture is that Keepers of the Culture and Black storytellers, all the stories have a lesson, you know. And so going forward, what do you see is Coach's job to tie those stories into some kind of form, book or something where young people can, as they did traditionally, hear the story as a child and then grow up and realize, wait a minute, this story applies to my life right now in terms of how I should deal with my marriage, in terms of how I should, what kind of man I should develop into, what kind of woman I should develop into. So what plans do you see to for Coachy to make that impact? Because what you're doing is so tremendous.
Thank you. Yes, well, what we are doing, I am not here alone. I am one small part. We are doing it. And one thing, Nabs and Kosi, we are on the same page. The difference is the other storytelling organizations that are in America, we are doing different because Nabs and Kosi, we are on the same page, understanding that what we do is totally different, and it's rooted in our intention. Our intentions for storytelling is so different from any other cultures or any other organizations as Black storytellers.
Mhm.
There's so many intentions and reasons why a Black person would tell a story and why they were shared. But one thing we are working on is putting the pen to the paper.
Mhm.
We have such knowledge of stories. We have such knowledge of our history through stories that we can tell it, but we also need to write it down.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's so interesting that we are a culture that don't have like a universal access to our stories. You think of the Bible is essentially, it has wisdom in it, but it's the story of the Jewish people. But everybody's reading it. Everybody's pulling out of proverbs and morals and fables and parables and stuff. And I know in so many African religions, those texts do exist. They're just not necessarily on a public knowledge. It's just not easily accessed.
Yeah.
But keepers of the culture, we have the stories. We need to start writing them down. And so there are different ways that we're starting to infuse that as writing these stories down, because it's not just we need to have them. We also have to be in reality that we have a lot of elders and we need to get their stories down. These are living, walking libraries and archives. And when they transition, we lose whatever they didn't share. And
Yes.
so we have to be about that business of archiving what we have, whether it's a flyer or we taking time to write that story down. So 20 years from now, if somebody needs a story, this is a story that came from the pen of Mama Irma Gardner Hammond. The Dinah stories, whatever the story is, writing it down,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of our storytellers write original stories.
Yes.
And I feel out of place sometimes with Coachy because I haven't published. And so um
I remember that
and
book that Brother Goss did. Yeah.
yes, and
Talk that
so
talk. Mm-hmm.
yeah, talk that talk, jump up and say, seeing people, there are multiple people in Keepers of the Culture whose names they are part of these anthologies. And so being serious about that, being intentional about, I'm going to write this one down, not just for me to remember it, but for
Right.
somebody coming after me.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Well,
somebody can get healed by our stories. I know we went on WURD and we the first ones, I think, did a what, 3 hour
Three
marathon.
hour Black Storytelling Marathon on the radio. Yep.
And one of the things that was really good for me, because I wrote a poem, and I'm not really a poet, and I wrote a poem about, it didn't come right out and say, but it was about um, gunshot violence and what mothers and people were feeling in Philadelphia. It was kind of a catharsis for me because I wrote it with Eric in mind, and that we've got to do something and know that this is an emergency. So I see us getting more involved with other Black organizations and whatever's going on, like right now, COVID, gunshots, all this violence. They need our stories. They
yes.
need us to tell what was going on, because people that come after us, they'll have a scattered version if we don't tell the story. We have to be the ones to tell our own story. Otherwise, we'll never win. It's just like the lion and the hunter. The lion want to know, I want to know why, the hunter always wins, because the lion ain't telling the story. So we got to be the lions and tell our own story. And
Mhm.
so I think that that's something that we are working on, and we are partnering with other organizations who've kind of got the message now. They know who we are and know what we can do, and they know the power of storytelling. And different people are asking us. I got a call from what's the woman's name? Sherelle Parker.
Oh, wow.
That's a whole different group. She saw the Dinah story that I do. It's on film now. And so she wants to show that to her audience. And then she wants to have a panel discussion with me, the guy that rewrote the story, and the woman that plays the young Dinah. We do it bouncing off of one another, the young Dinah and the older Dinah. So it's a whole new audience. I had no idea that, politicians want to get into us and tell stories, they see us.
And no, I would like each of you to tell a good story.
I knew you was going to say that. I knew you were going to say that. You want us to tell a story. Okay. It's got to be short, right?
Yep. Doesn't have to be too short, but for time's sake.
Uh, you got the young mind, Paul. You probably got one on top of your head, right?
Oh, there's so many. Where do I
No, where
start?
do you start?
The one that you said your students love, the monkey one.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Tell that one.
Okay. I'll do this one. I did this one at Kwanzaa. It was one of the Kwanzaa principles, Kuji Chakalia. Do for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I was growing up in my house with my mom and my dad. And so as I grew up, my mom was starting to show me different things as I was becoming a young man. And I always wanted to do something for myself. So one day, my mom had taught me how to do laundry. And I had bought these brand new K-Swiss white shoes. And she told me not to wear them before school started. Sure enough, I couldn't wait a week before, and I wore those K-Swiss canvas, and they got dirt on them. So I went home and I was trying to scrub all the dirt out, and it just came to me, and I said, I can wash these. There's canvas in them. And my mom was like, you don't wash no shoes in the washing machine. You take a toothbrush and you scrub the stain out and then rinse it with water and let it air dry. I didn't have time for that. I washed those shoes and the stain came out just nice. So school starts and I'm walking down, I'm about to go into the hallway and I'm walking down the hallway, and the way the doors were set up in the classrooms, they had a hook in the ground. Every class door had a hook to hold the door open. So I'm walking down the hallway, everything's fine. And next thing you know, I don't pay attention. I hear, I look down and that hook had ripped the side of my shoe. And I start walking down and I hear a voice, and the voice says, man, look like a werewolf ate up your shoe. And I went home and told my mama about it. And she said, that's what you get for washing them shoes. You wash them shoes, and those shoes got shrunk by the hot water. The cloth got shrunk, and your shoes were so tight, you walked by the hooks, and it ripped your shoes up. So then the next time, I decided I was going to wash my pants. And I hated the way my mom washed my jeans, because she would wash them and they would still be wet the next morning. Every time it seemed like the pants that I wanted to wear the most were the pants that she washed the night before and they were still wet. I'm like, Mama, why are you always leaving the pants wet? She's like, you don't let pants dry all the way in the dryer. You hang them up and let them dry damp so you don't get wrinkles in them and you don't have to iron them. I'm like, I'd rather iron them. I just don't want wet pants. So one morning, the pants I wanted to wear was hanging up on that ceiling and they were still wet. And so I was like, okay, well, if I wear them, my body heat sitting on the bus and everything, they'll be pretty much dry by the time I get to the school. So I got the pants on and I felt a little dampness and I'm sitting on the bus, everything's fine. And I walk into my classroom and I sit down, class starts, and there's another voice. Dude, did you pee on yourself or something? Sure enough, the behind of my pants was still wet because by me sitting, they never had a chance to dry. And so I go home to my mom. I'm like, Mama, they was making fun of me again because I had wet pants on because you choose to hang them up and let them air dry. And she was like, you don't listen. I'm trying to show you how to do something. If you would have washed those shoes by hand, you wouldn't have got the hole in them shoes. If you would have let those pants air dry, and if you would have washed them the day before you wanted to wear them, they would have been dry when you put them on your behind. And I said, Mama, I don't like this. I am trying to do for myself so you don't have to wash all the time. I'm trying to be independent and be ready to be a young adult. I want to do for myself. My mama looked at me square in the eye. She said, Paul, it ain't nothing wrong with doing for yourself, long as you know what you doing. And that's the story.
I love that story. I love that story. That was so funny. That was so funny.
The beauty of that story, I can see you telling that in the classroom because it's about you had to listen. That's why you have to listen.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's showing you that's why you have to listen because elders know something that you don't know.
If you don't know.
It's funny, funny, funny. Oh goodness, I'm sitting here wiping my eyes.
Thank you.
That's a great story. I love that story.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell a story that's not really funny, but it has a lesson in it. This story is called Everything is Connected. And I like telling this story to a lot of different audiences. There was a king who ruled with an iron fist. He was a little man, but he was loud, and he liked telling everybody what to do. His name was King Yasser, and that was a good name for him because every time he told his servants what to do, they'd say, Yasser, Yasser, and they stand up straight in front of him. He thought that he knew everything. Well, one night he was sleeping, and he kept hearing something, waking him up. Rap, rap, rap. So he looked outside. Well, outside there was a pond, and there were frogs out there making noises. He couldn't have that. He had to get a good night's sleep. So he called all his servants together and said, you've got to execute these frogs. Get rid of them. I don't care what you do, but get them out of here so I can have a good night's sleep. Well, sir, they did that. They did that. And he had a good night's sleep for a while, about 2 or 3 months. And then one night he woke up and he was saying, ow, ow, ouch, ouch, ouch. Oh, he was just having a hard time. And he said, what is that? And he looked out and he couldn't really see, but he said, that's mosquitoes. Why are these mosquitoes after me? And he was going to call for his servants and get them to, get rid of the mosquitoes. But his wife, the queen, said, honey, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Well, you're just the queen. You're a woman. I know what I'm doing. I'm King Yasser. I'm King Yasser. So he called all his men together and he told them, we've got to get rid of these mosquitoes. But they said, but King, how are we going to do that? I don't care how you do it. Get some nets, get some poison, get some rope, whatever you have to do, get these mosquitoes. Yasser, Yasser, they said. So they started trying to get rid themselves of mosquitoes. And they just did everything they could. But the mosquitoes were winning. The mosquitoes would bite the horses and cows, and the cows would do their tails and knock over things, and babies would be crying. Everything was going wrong. They couldn't get all those mosquitoes, but he insisted that they get those mosquitoes. Well, it went on and went on, and it didn't get better. It got worse. The people were fed up with King Yasser because he wanted everything his way. And he started seeing carts and wagons leaving this town. The town became almost a ghost town, and he didn't have anything to rule. And his wife said, I told you not to do that. You can't have everything your way. Everything is connected. Frogs are not vegetarians. You got rid of the frogs, you got rid of even flies, and you try to get rid of mosquitoes. Now you have no kingdom. Everything is connected, and you can't have your way all the time. So that's a good lesson for people who want to have their way, that want to rule, and don't realize that everything is connected. We are connected to well, especially Africans, we're connected to the universe. We're connected to the grass, and we're connected to the trees. We're connected to the plant, connected to the air, connected to the earth. And that's a good lesson to tell children or even grown-ups about being connected.
Yeah, I got a call from the Sierra Club today, and they asked me what did I feel was important about the environment. That's a perfect story. That's a perfect story because everything is interconnected to one
Mm-hmm.
another, and people need to realize that, especially people who say, "Oh, global warming is not real." Everything is connected, so that's a perfect story. And I just wanted to close out by saying thank you so much. The work that you're doing is so powerful. I'm a big supporter, a big
Yeah.
fan, and will do anything I can to
Oh,
help Coach C grow, including typing up some of those stories. So you said,
okay. Okay. Now you don't know. We will act on that. We will have you. We will have you a member.
Right. And I
okay, I'm
like to
not.
share our social media information. They can find us on our website is www.kotcinc.org, and you can find us on Facebook as Keepers of the Culture Inc. and Twitter and Instagram, Coatsy Griots, KOTCGRIOTS.
Okay, and what's the next event that Coach C is doing? What's the next upcoming event? That,
Go ahead, Mama, because she's a big stakeholder in it.
Well, one of the things we're going to do is get family stories from the Germantown area because people saw me doing Dinah and they're inspired to do stories. So we're going to do that in partnership with Stanton House. So that's coming up on the 24th of April. And Keepers of the Culture will play a part in that because we'll be helping people to craft their stories. And then, like I said, on the 29th of March, Sherelle Parker is hosting the Dinah story with me. Then a couple of us are doing Afro History Museum and the work of women. We're doing that on the 17th and the 31st, I think.
Mhm.
Carla Wally and myself are doing that. Um, then
Also, I'm sorry, Mama, go ahead.
Franklin.
Yeah, I was gonna say the same day that we will be in Germantown, and this is what I love about coaching. We can be in multiple parts of the community at the same time doing the work, and so some of us will be at Franklin Square Park on April 24th in partnership with the African American Museum of Philadelphia, doing we call it Griot Tales, and we started it last summer, going into early fall. We're at Franklin Square Park, and we do storytelling for 1 hour, and it's free and open to the public. And so on the 24th, I think from 1 p.m. to 2 p.m., we'll be doing stories about the Earth in celebration of Earth Day.
Mm-hmm.
So all families invited out for that. They do socially distance. It's outside. They have the chairs cleaned and at a nice distance and proximity from the audience and the teller. And so it's a good way to kind of bring in the springtime with some storytellings in the park.
okay.
Yep. And we'll be planning our lesson.
Yes,
Yeah.
be listening because Love Night is going to happen one way or another.
One
It's
way
going
or
to
the
happen.
other. It might happen both ways, but
So,
we will do love night.
are any of the things besides what you said, Paul, available online? Are any of those?
Oh, also, I forgot our YouTube channel. If
Yeah.
you go to I believe it's Coatsy Storytell. Let me look it up. I don't want to misquote. It's right here. I keep it bookmarked. If you go to our YouTube channel, it is called, oh, of course, I'm in airplane mode. Hold on. I was trying to keep my phone from making noise. It is called Keepers of the Culture Storytellers. And so it is our YouTube channel. And so you can see I think we have productions going back at least 8 years.
Yeah, we do.
And so some of our productions, the entire production is on there, video by video. Love Night, when we went live over the summer, the whole show is on there. It's about 3 hours worth of stories. And so whenever you want to hear a story or you want to see a specific artist in Coatsy, these are good times to do that. You can go to our YouTube channel and see us in action until our next production.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna watch.
It's also a good way that I know that people have gone to there, and it's an advertisement. They see us and say, "Oh, I want that. I want them to come to my church. I want them to come to my." It's a good way that they can go and see what we do because we're transparent. We don't, hide anything. We're not in competition with anything but ourselves, and it's a good way to promote. So if you go to the YouTube, you can see a lot of stuff that we've done.
Mm-hmm.
So wonderful. So, as the editor of New Conscious Woman and New Conscious Man, I thank you so much. I know we'll be
Thank
working
you.
together. We're working together to really create new conscious men and new conscious women out here.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having us. Yes, thank you. It's a privilege.
Yes.
What you're doing is great work. Great work.
Thank you.
Ancestors are smiling at you though.
Oh, I feel them.
Yeah, I do. I do. I do. Yeah. They're around us all the time. Yeah.
With
And the
you.
more we're aware of them, the more they come around us.
Yes, yes, they're walking with you. You must have often broken griots in your last lives.
Huh?
You must have
Yeah.
been griots in your last lives.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
I know that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Have a wonderful day. Have a wonderful evening. And
You
Thank
thank
you.
too. Be safe and well, sisters.
everyone for
Thank you so much. I'll be in that dance class soon.
yes, yes. Pass the word.
Yes.
Whoever fit after
Yes.
whoever fit after she for a month, they will get a copy, a free copy of
Yeah.
New Conscious Woman, New Conscious Man online.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Good.
you. Thank you. All right.
All right. Good night.
Good night.